So I met one of the great loves of my life in June of 2021 at a commuter lot off of Massachusetts I-90. I was there to meet a staff member from Guiding Eyes for the Blind. She was there to deliver a van full of 8-week-old Labrador Retriever puppies to volunteer puppy raisers coming from all over New England. When I got to the van, I reached in and I opened the little door to this gray plastic crate, and all I could see were these big eyes staring back at me. And I reached in and I pulled out this impossibly tiny little ball of black velvet with the name Sumatra printed in big block letters across his collar. Several months before that moment, I had just purchased my first home. And the thing that was most exciting about that was that it was the first time in my adult life that I was no longer under a landlord's no dog policy. And I loved the idea of having a dog and having a companion during that part of COVID when we were still pretty confined to our homes. But while I knew I loved the idea of a dog, I also knew that I didn't really know the reality of that responsibility. And like any self-respecting scientist, when faced with uncertainty, I knew I needed to do more research. So it was not with a sense of altruism that I typed in service dog puppy raising near me in a search engine later that year. I figured, if I raised a service dog for one of these organizations, I could learn what vet bills cost without actually pay them, learn how to train a puppy, and learn how one might actually fit into my relatively low responsibility single woman lifestyle. The night that I brought Sumatra home, I was very quickly confronted with the reality of an 8-week-old puppy. He got viciously car sick and he cried the entire 2-hour ride home, and he cried that night and several nights after that, and I would fall asleep laying next to his crate with my fingers through the front grate, trying to comfort him, just feeling so overwhelmed and terrified that I had made this horrible mistake. And this year that we would be working together just felt like such a long time. But by the time of our first Guiding Eyes training class 2 weeks later, we had settled into a bit of a rhythm. I was getting a respectable 6 hours of sleep a night and waking up each morning in slightly less abject terror. And at this first class, me and another new puppy raiser, we were meeting outside of a mall in Kingston. We were instructed to sit on the sidewalk and just gently touch our puppy's ears and paws in a way to desensitize them to human touch. And the other puppy was bouncing around as you would expect from a now 10-week-old puppy, but Sumatra was still feeling awful from his car ride, and he crawled in my lap and immediately fell asleep. And I just sat there for the entire hour, just gently stroking his back, falling in love, just wondering how I became this little guy's safe space. Over the next year, the two of us worked really hard together. As the world began to reopen and he matured, we moved from parking lots to hardware stores to expertly navigating tight grocery store aisles. He learned commands like sit and down and stay, and I learned what it felt like to love with every cell of my body. And with each passing month, I questioned how I could possibly say goodbye to this little guy who had become so important to my life, because sometimes he was the only living creature I saw on a given day. But in June of 2022, not long after his first birthday, we received an email from Guiding Eyes saying that they were excited to welcome him back on October 16th for his temperament test, and if that went well, then he would stay on at the training school to learn how to be a professional guide dog. Loving something so much and knowing the exact date that you would have to say goodbye seemed to alter the physics of time. These little, seemingly insignificant moments took on this weight, like the feeling of him sleeping along the tops of my feet and listening to him snore while I worked at my computer. But those months just seemed to blast by in the blink of an eye, and I found myself on October 16th walking into the training school in New York. There was a staff member waiting for us, and I handed her his leash. She took it and unhooked his collar. It was this bright green collar that looked so striking against his black fur. Had his little name tag on it with my phone number that showed that at least for a little while he belonged to me. And she looped up a metal collar around his neck and asked if I'd like to go walk back with him to the kennel where he would hopefully be spending the next 6 to 8 months. I shook my head because there was no way that words were going to be coming out of my throat at that point, and followed them back. And I sat on the floor of his kennel and watched as he darted around, sniffing all the little corners. And when I couldn't bear it anymore, I got up and I wrapped my arms around him, and I buried my face in the scruff of his neck and breathed in his funky little Frito smell. And I told him how much I love him, how proud of him I was. And I thanked him for bringing so much joy into my life during a time of such loneliness. and for teaching me how to love with my whole heart when heartbreak was a certainty. I left that day crying harder than I've ever cried in my entire life. And I had a lot of lovely friends and family reach out to me after that. And one particularly wise friend said that this was the act of service, not all those months of hard work and training, but the moment I handed his lease to a stranger and walked away willingly. I've had a lot of time to reflect on our time together, and I know that I poured all of my love and all of the very best parts of me into him. And he took that, and with every person that worked with him and fell in love with him, they did the same. And that love grew and multiplied and expanded, and he carried that out into the world. And I got to be part of that. And there's nothing like it. And so while I have not been able to let go of my boy, I have been able to loosen the grip just a little bit. And I'm happy to report that he's happy and healthy and living his best life working in Connecticut. And I'm currently raising my 4th guide dog puppy named Rick. And none of the goodbyes were any easier, but they have become more familiar and in that a little bit more bearable. Thank you.